What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the BizDad podcast. Today, I am super excited to chat with Kevin Lavelle out of Dallas, Texas. Looking forward to chatting with you about your business, about your family, and kind of learning about you a little bit more. If you can, go ahead and introduce yourself, your family, and tell us about your business.
You got it. Thanks for the opportunity here. My name is Kevin Lavelle, and I am the very happy husband to my beautiful bride, Jen Lavelle. And I've got two young kids. They're about 8 and 6. Jack is my son and firstborn, and Lala, named after my mom and my wife's mom, Laura Marie, together is about 6. And then business-wise, I started a company called Mizzen+Main in 2012. Had a crazy idea for a performance fabric dress shirt, a dress shirt that stretches. You don't have to iron it or dry clean it. We were laughed out of every trade show when I started the business, and since then we've done hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. We've got great partnerships with guys like J.J. Watt and Phil Mickelson, backed by a PE firm. And I am on to my second startup. We got a great team running Mizzen+Main, and I'm at it again, building a company called Harbor with a great co-founder named Charlie Hill, and we're building a much better baby monitor because the leading product on the market failed us. And we are building a really unique remote night nanny, sleep coach, and pediatric telehealth business inside that overall ecosystem. So that's a little bit about me. Hobby-wise, I like to think that one day I'll be a good golfer. Right now, I'm just still trying. And I'm still trying. I've been trying for about 35 years. So we'll get there someday.
Welcome to the BizDad podcast, where we dive into the melding of fathership and entrepreneurship with your host, the original BizDad himself, Adam LaBar. Adam is a Christian, a former Air Force officer, a dad to 3 amazing kids, a coach, a real estate investor, and a business owner. On this podcast, he'll explore the unique journeys of amazing dads who are striving for greatness in both business and family. So whether you're a dad who is an aspiring entrepreneur, a seasoned business owner, or simply a man striving to be a better dad, get ready as the BizDad brings you conversations to inspire, challenge, and equip you to be a better dad and entrepreneur.
Boy, I understand that feeling completely. At this point, I barely get to golf anymore. My son golfs way more than I do. My almost 10-year-old. He's getting close to being able to beat me at this point at 10 years old. So it's getting a little out of hand. So I put a golf simulator in the house. Still don't get to golf. I'm like, it's right here. Like, you'd think I'd be over there all the time, but no, I still don't do it much. But yeah, so I want to go into a little bit of your background a little bit. I'm really looking forward to chatting with you about some of this stuff. But let me go into your background a little bit, just to kind of learn where you came from. I know before we started recording, you mentioned being from Florida, but tell me a little bit about your upbringing. Like, tell me about your parents, especially your dad, and kind of what it was like growing up with him as a father.
I was born in the Northeast area outside of Princeton, New Jersey, and we moved to Florida when I was 10. Really feel like I grew up in Florida, and lived in Sarasota until college, and a scholarship took me to SMU. My sister also got a scholarship to SMU, so followed in her footsteps, and that is what brought me to Dallas and why I've been there. My dad worked in the health insurance industry for most of his career, healthcare, health insurance, both. And he had moved around quite a bit before I was born. And then we moved from kind of Princeton to outside of Philadelphia when I was 7. And then we moved from outside of Philadelphia, an area called Westchester, down to Sarasota when I was 10. Job change. And then it was around the time I was going into high school. So around the time I was 13, he ended up taking another job, and that had him travel most weeks Monday through Thursday or Friday. So the kind of commuting life. And he did a great job being as engaged as he possibly could. You know, he would come home for soccer games, and we'd spend a lot of time together on the weekends. But I just sort of grew up. That was life. That was what we did. Mm-hmm. But I do feel like I won the parent lottery, 2 wonderful parents that just a really supportive environment growing up, really very, very, very high standards, and kind of an environment where it wasn't a rule by fear environment. Maybe in hindsight it was a little bit of that, but there was just an aura of, don't do things you're not supposed to do. Yeah. And It was never anything but, love overall, but there was very much an instilled do the right thing all the time. And very early on, I don't know how they did it, I'm trying to figure it out with my own kids, they instilled a very serious drive for me to want to perform my absolute best all the time. And I ended up gaining a reputation in high school. I was a part of a magnet math and science program at our public high school, of being the kid who would argue, like I would get a 94 on my test and I would go up afterwards and I would argue with the teacher as to why the way the question was worded, actually I got that question right. And turns out most of my teachers really loved it because I cared that much about it. I didn't always win those arguments, but it was a very innate drive to want to succeed from a very early age. Sometimes that's leads to neurotic behavior and not necessarily the healthiest and attitude and view of yourself. But overall, they set me on a very healthy path for success, and they've done a really wonderful job as I have grown up and built 2 businesses now of continuing to want to see me succeed, but also making sure that I feel, supported, especially as I grow and build my own young family.
Yeah. I'm got like 14 questions already that I want to ask, but the fact that your dad was in the healthcare service, is that at all related to you starting something right now and integrating yourself into the healthcare service, or was that just like luck of the draw, the way it kind of worked out? Okay.
Yeah, luck of the draw. My first business, men's clothing. Second business, building hardware, software, and telehealth services. It is not as far of a leap as many people when I tell them what I'm doing next after having started Mizzen+Main. Ultimately, it's a consumer brand. It's a physical product. It's mass market distribution. So it's not that different, right? Like I sell product online. I design, invent, build products, sell it online. But the overlap, I've certainly learned some things from my dad along the way about the industry overall, but not directly correlated.
Okay. And how's your relationship with your dad now? Is it still strong?
Yeah, it's wonderful. We try to go home at least 2 or 3 times a year to Florida with the kids. And it's wonderful. They still live in Sarasota, so getting to take the kids home to Sarasota, we'll go fishing because it's on the bay. We'll go to Siesta Key Beach on the regular because it's a beautiful place to go visit. So I'd like to say that if they lived in the middle of farm country, that I would still go visit as much, but it definitely makes it easier to have a place to bring the kids that is so awesome, where when we go visit, it's great to spend time with them. And then my wife and I will sort of say, like, at 8:30 or 9, we're driving to the beach and we're going to be there for probably 3 to 6 hours. And my parents will come down for a little bit. And it's also great just to be able to spend time, in the evenings, all under one roof.
Nice. I love it. You mentioned the very high standards growing up and how, and I'm trying to place, when you were, that drive to succeed, right? So the very high standards probably led to the drive to succeed, right? It's one of those chicken or the egg things you don't really know, because sometimes the drive to succeed leads parents to really have high standards because they know what their kids are capable of. So I'm curious, from your perspective, both while you were going through the high standards as a kid and then as an adult looking back on it, how did you view it then versus how do you view it now, those high standards and that drive to succeed?
That's a great question. So, at the time, I don't think I really knew anything different. So it just was sort of, David Foster Wallace, "This is water." It was like, this is just life. I have distinct memories growing up where, you say, how do you spell watermelon? And there was never an answer to that question. The response was, how do you think you spell watermelon? And so it was a lot of, self-driven, like they instilled that very, very early. And then, I don't ever remember a moment where either one of my parents ever said, like, you have to sit down and you have to do your homework. It just sort of happened very naturally based on all the things that happened up until the age when you start to do homework. And then when I look at it now, I am trying to figure out with my own kids how to help that self-driven, because there is an element of the flywheel that you need to start to get to spin and have them connect the dots to, when I work hard, good things happen, and hold myself to high standards. There are different things that kids are great at. And as a great example of this, my son has discovered a love of running. He's 7 years old, and he will run 3 to 4 miles a day, 3 times a week, including Saturday morning hill sprints with a high school cross country team. He goes out and runs with them. And all of my friends just look at the pictures that I share and they're like, what are you doing? Like, I don't know. He just wants to run. And if he doesn't run, he's not happy. Yeah. And that is as inherent in him as can be. And with my daughter, it's gymnastics. She is obsessed. She does gymnastics 2.5 hours a day, 3 times a week. And there's not, I mean, if we have to say to them, like, we are going to practice now, I think I've had to say it once to my son where he didn't want to go, maybe once. And that I feel like is the same type of thing that I had with as I was growing up. Just, it was very natural. Schoolwork is a little bit more of a challenge with my son. He tends to do just fine when he actually decides he wants to. He just doesn't really decide he wants to often. And so we're working through. That's the thing that I am struggling with the most as a dad of young kids, where you're starting to, they don't really have homework yet. He's in 2nd grade. But there are things where, hey, we want to start working on spelling. Hey, we want to start working on math patterns. Not because your teacher's going to grade your homework, but because now's the time when you learn these things. And the earlier you learn them, the easier it is later. And so as I reflect back as an adult, looking at my own childhood, I don't know how they did it. And, I ask them from time to time, and I don't really have a clear and concise answer.
Yeah. Yeah, I try to pull some of that stuff out from my parents as well, and I don't really get much of a clear and concise answer either, right? It's more of we just kind of went along with whatever we could, right? Like, I was a military brat, so both of my parents were in the Air Force, and my dad was the long-term one. So we bounced around a lot, and then after he got out, we bounced around a lot again, and it was like, hey, we just kind of did whatever. And my first probably 13 years of my life, I was very dedicated to school. I was in all of the advanced programs. I was like put in all these little special classes for like the advanced students and all this stuff. And then I learned what a social life was, and that was it. Like I don't know what happened. I just kind of stopped caring. And I sometimes wish that I didn't ever experience that, where I wish I was just a nerd the rest of my time, because I wonder where I would be if I didn't. But at the same point, I think that I've done pretty decent for myself, so I'm glad that I've gotten where I've gotten. But I often try to look back at what I did. How do I apply what I learned to my kids? And I asked my parents the same thing, and it's like I don't really know if there is a way, and I don't know what what your thoughts are on that. But I kind of struggle going, all right, how do I apply what I learned from my childhood to my kids without it, me trying to recreate my childhood for my kids? Has that ever popped up in your brain as you're thinking about how to again instill that drive and instill that ambition in your kids? What has your thought process been like for that?
I think about it a lot. I also think, I moved twice. We moved when I was 7 and we moved when I was 10. And then around the time my dad started traveling consistently, I actually decided, I was at a small private school, and I decided to switch to the public school because I wanted to sort of broaden. I don't know how much I thought about it at the time, but I wanted to broaden my horizons a little bit. There were 32 kids in my class, and it was very insular. And so I switched to a public high school. And now looking back on it, the transitions that I had and having to reset friendships multiple times and having to change somewhat of who I was, I think really helped lay the foundation for how comfortable I was to go to school out of state when most of my friends stayed at state schools, which were lovely schools, but I wanted to spread my wings and go somewhere else. And then the comfort level I had, my first job, I worked in the Middle East for a year, and then the ability to feel comfortable starting 2 startups. I think a lot of that came from the unplanned nature of multiple moves and multiple, life changes that they couldn't have possibly said, this is what we're aiming to achieve with moving, is helping build resilience in our own kids. I will say my sister and I were both voracious and, learning and wanting to get good grades. And it doesn't seem like my parents had to try that hard at instilling that part of it. There were plenty of other disciplinary and, following the rules things they had to stay tight on. But when I think about how to set that up for my kids, I've talked about this before, but people, when you ask them what they want for their kids, a lot of people understandably will say, I want them to be happy. Mm-hmm. And that is an incredibly subjective thing to say.
Yeah.
Because happiness is very fleeting. And there's a great book by Abigail Schreier called Bad Therapy about how much the therapy industry has messed up the world and kids especially. Like if you ask most people throughout the day, are you happy right now? The answer is no. Like, I don't know. I'm doing some work. I'm commuting. I'm driving. I'm trying to pay some bills. I'm generally like, if you ask most people most of the time, their answer wouldn't be, yes, I'm really happy with what I'm doing right now. But it doesn't mean that those things don't provide meaning. It doesn't mean that they're not the things that you're supposed to do. And so I am trying to find a way to help build resilience, help build character, help build a sense of meaning and purpose and drive that they can then take and make their own. Mm-hmm. Because, getting the best grades or winning all of the sports things, sure, that's great. But that's really not going to matter 30 years from now. What's going to matter is, do you know how to build a relationship? Do you know how to be a good friend? Do you know how to communicate? Do you know how to find your way through difficult situations? So I'm curious with growing up, as you said, as a military brat, what was your sibling dynamic like? And how did you find, you said all of a sudden you found a social life. Was it a friend who kind of indoctrinated you into being social? What was that story?
So I had two older sisters. So like my oldest sister, she's 4 years older than me, and she never throughout her entire time went to a school more than 2 years, right? And so she was bouncing around all over the place. I went to one school for more than 2 years. I was in the same school district for 5 years, but I only went to, because I went from junior high to high school. But I think it was the stability of knowing that we were staying somewhere long term that created the social life, where it was like, man, I'm actually in sports now. I'm talking to people more. I'm doing things like I played t-ball and stuff like that, and I played baseball and all the way through up until junior high. But once I hit junior high and I actually started playing sports, I was on the wrestling team. I was attempting to play football, but I was very tiny, so I did not do so well on that. But running cross country, it was one of those where it was like, okay, I'm actually making friends, and these are people that I may actually know for more than a year or two. So I think that was just kind of the dynamic that I found myself in. So maybe if I had have stayed in somewhere for a long term, I would have just been a class clown the entire time, and I would have never, back on it, kind of one of those, the way that things worked out is the way that things worked out. It led to where I was, and I'm pleased with how it all turned out. But it was such a weird, and I didn't really think about it in that way until you asked me that question. So I appreciate that. It probably was the stability of knowing I was somewhere that led to me getting that social life and starting that whole process. But you could sort of emerge. You could allow your personality to maybe come out. That's interesting. Yeah. And there was one other friend that I made in 8th grade. His name was Joe, and he was an Air Force brat as well. So his dad was in the Air Force. They had just moved from Japan. So he and I connected really well just because we both had Air Force dads. We both traveled around the world all over the place. And, I traveled mostly around the country. He traveled around the world. But it was like we just had a connection. And that was one of those, I went to his house multiple times. And that was probably the start. So I have Joe to blame. Joe's the guy I can blame. So thank you. Now I can go and give Joe a hard time and say, it's your daggum fault that I stopped studying.
Blame your friend. You finally figured it out.
I will definitely blame Joe. And it's funny because he's got a podcast too that talks about like WWE, and he was a big WWF guy back in the day and all this other stuff. And I forgot the nerd. the Nerd Something Network. If I can't remember what it's called, but I wish I could, because it'd be fun to throw it out here. But so he and I have talked about jumping on each other's podcasts just because it's comical. I would do horribly talking about WWF and WWE and all that stuff, because I know nothing about any of that stuff. But but he could definitely talk about being a dad, so that's a plus. And I could blame him publicly for my lack of skills in the education department. But anyways, let's go back to. I want to go back into the business side of the house a little bit. Sure. You mentioned being in overseas, I think Dubai, right, for your first job out of college. What was that all about? What'd you do over there?
I was hired I graduated in 2008 amidst the GFC, and in 2007 I accepted a job with Oliver Wyman, a management consulting firm. They do kind of all sorts of management consulting strategy. Think Bain, McKinsey, BCG, that type of work. And as the world sort of unraveled in 2007 into early 2008, I was offered a chance to move to Dubai instead, and instead of taking the job in the U.S. as things were cooling. And I jumped on it. It was a great experience. My first job out of school. I moved to Dubai. I worked in an office with 130 people from 33 different countries, which was a very unique experience. And when I went to Dubai, one of the partners that was there had been working in the area for about 15 years. And he said, we were sort of asking him for tips and tricks. And he said, you need to go to Vu's Bar, which is one of the more popular bars at the time in Dubai. And Dubai is a city where, and I don't know what it is today. When I was there, alcohol was free flowing, but only in 5-star hotels. So basically in Western 5-star hotels, it was like being in Vegas. Outside of that, you couldn't get alcohol. And so a couple of us went to Vu's Bar at his suggestion, and he said, it's like the bar scene from Star Wars, where you've got all these creatures from all over the galaxy, and everyone's, you got the music playing. And I went into Vu's Bar and was like, oh my God, this is exactly what it's like. And you've got just people from all over the world in all of their, we all have unique traits and tendencies, and most people can pick an American out anywhere they go in the world. But like, you had the Russian oligarchs, you had the Saudi oil lords, you had, people from across Europe, people from across Africa, Latin America, and everyone's just there to basically do business and make a lot of money. And I will say, Dubai, going over there, I had a little bit of apprehension. I traveled a lot. I traveled overseas a lot prior to going to Dubai, but never been to the Middle East. And as a kid who, I grew up, George Bush was, the first president that I really ever remember. And obviously all the things that had happened with the global war on terror. You show up as an American to the Middle East for the first time. It's a little green. I will say Dubai was the safest I've felt anywhere in the entire world. And it's very hard to describe what that is like, especially when you go over there, you're like, okay, this is a little different than anything I've ever done before. And then within a week, you're like, oh yeah, this is the safest place in the world. And one of the other very potent memories from being over there, I lived in the Dubai Marina, which was a very popular expat community. And there were probably 60 high rises that were at least 40 stories each, all in that area. I mean, it was huge. And there were another 120 going up around us. I don't remember how long I'd been there. I'd been there a little while. But there was a drive-by shooting, an assassination in my parking garage. A Chechen rebel leader who had basically escaped and was living in Dubai, kind of on the run, was assassinated in my parking garage. And it didn't make the front page news because, of course, they censor the news there. But also, no one that lived in the Dubai Marina was even remotely, like, no one had a second thought. It wasn't like, oh gosh, maybe I'm in a dangerous place. It was like, I mean, they're not coming after me, right? They weren't trying to just like rob somebody. It was an assassination. It's fine, no big deal. And that was a moment where I remember thinking, like, I'm in a very different place. This is a very different experience. think about if you live in Dallas, Texas, and there's a drive-by shooting in your parking garage, you're figuring out how to move. Like, you're going to break your lease and you're going to go somewhere else. And here it was like, yeah, that's kind of crazy. Anyway, back to work.
Yeah, that's it. I've heard a lot of great things about Dubai. The first assassination I've talked about Dubai though, so this is good. Yeah, but
glad to break new ground.
How long did you live out there? I think you mentioned, like, was it 2 years? You said, or a year?
I was there for a year. Yeah, and basically I went there in 2008 to 2009, and when we got there, the economy in the Middle East was still booming, despite everywhere else just sort of falling off a cliff. And there's this very precipitous moment in time where over the kind of holidays, we had a meeting just before the holidays with our whole office. And it was like, our booking rate, we are booked up for the entire year. Like, we have 0 Slack staff. We have 0 Slack hours. We are maxed out. Like, I know everything else is terrible everywhere else, but like, we're doing good here, guys. Don't worry about it. We'll be okay. And then the first week back after the holidays, it was like, so 95% of our contracts have been canceled, and we're going to unfortunately have to undergo some layoffs within a span of 2 weeks. And I, as a brand new hire, was their cheapest resource imaginable. And, I'd only been there a couple months, and I'd done fine. And so I survived the round of layoffs. Business was slow for a lot of the rest of the time that I was there. It was interesting work, but I just thought at the end of my first full year there, I don't know if I'm going to have a job here if I stay, just because things were still really slow. And if I'm going to lose my job, I'm better off being back in the States where I've got a network and I can go figure out, something else to do. So I moved back to Dallas and started working out of the Dallas office, and did consulting for another year back in the US before moving to an energy company.
So what led the move from consulting to energy?
I don't think there was a better job for me and my personality and my learning style out of school than consulting, because I was exposed to brilliant operators who could tear apart problems and come up with solutions, and all of the frameworks. Consultants get made fun of a lot for very good reason, but like, framework oriented thinkers, I can walk into any industry, any type of problem set, and come back and say, like, this is how we could improve whatever you're doing. All of that's true. However, in the world of consulting, a lot of the work that you do is, I'll be blunt, like thrown in a trash can the minute you're done, because some senior VP had the budget to bring in the consultants, and there's this massive report and recommendation, and here's the path. And part of it is to sell another project. And I think that's a little bit of a pessimistic view. It's a lot of really good work and suggestions, but it doesn't mean that the company that hired the consultants to do the work has the bandwidth to actually go implement the solutions. I saw some really amazing transformation with some of the projects I was on, and it was really impactful work. But I also saw work that basically ended up in a trash can. And across both of those, the more important aspect of it was I just didn't really like the work. It was interesting, but it was like, I'm working 70 to 80 hours a week, working typically with clients who don't really want me to be there, aren't really excited about the work that we're doing. And then when the work is done, I hand it off. I have no idea if it's successful or implemented, and I've got some, a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth. Again, was also a part of some really amazing work that I know drove really big transformation, but I really just sort of said, like, this isn't what I want to go do for the rest of my life. And I do very vividly remember, hopefully I won't, call the specific person out in doing this, but consultants typically travel Monday through Thursday, and they're back in the office on Friday. It happened to be a somewhat slower Friday, and a couple partners and a couple of the, junior consultants, we walked to lunch in Dallas. And, we walked to like a Subway, picked up lunch and walked back. That was our break. And there were a whole bunch of people sitting down on a Friday afternoon at a lunch restaurant, sitting, having lunch. And a couple of the partners basically were like, who has time to sit and have lunch on a Friday? And I just remember thinking, like, I don't know. I don't necessarily want to be 50 and still not be allowed to have lunch. That doesn't seem awesome. To each their own, and that's great. But like, this is not work that I am so fulfilled by that I want to be doing it, 80 hours a week for the next 30 years. And so I will acknowledge, and this isn't to poo-poo on consultants because I've tried to make sure to acknowledge how great they are, and some of the work is really great. It was an unbelievable learning experience. It just wasn't, I just wasn't wired that way. And so one of my mentors, his name is Hunter Hunt. He's now co-CEO of Unconsolidated here in Dallas, one of the largest privately held energy companies in the world. He had become a mentor, and we got together every couple of months, and he gave me some great career feedback. And one of the things he said to me was, I remember as an investment banker, it was a really cool experience and I learned a lot, but I didn't ever feel like I was a part of something long-term. And I that is sort of why I came back to work at the family company, Hunt. So I called him up one day and said, hey, remember how you said you wanted to be a part of something long-term? I'm ready, and I'd love to come work for you. And then I ended up working for him for a couple of years.
All right. Yeah, it's weird, and I wrote it down, lunch on Friday as a quote, right? Like, it's one of those, you never know what it is. It's going to spark something in your head that says, I need to change, right? Something needs to change. And all it took was seeing somebody sit down and having lunch on a Friday, and you went, I don't know. That sounds nice. Like, I don't know. That sounds good. Like,
seems pretty good.
And I look back at a lot of my military time because I was in for 18 years, and it's like, man, oh man, lunch period would be nice sometimes, and it's, sometimes you just didn't get lunch. You just didn't, it is what it is. But there are certain things, for me, one of my biggest changes for me was just like seeing my kids, and then not seeing them, right? So like my oldest is born, and I think it's amazing. I live in a different house than my wife and now newborn son. We're in my wife and I are stationed at two different bases, 2 hours apart from each other. So then I'm like, boy, like nothing like having your kid and not be able to see him, right? So I traveled back and forth as much as I could and did everything that I could. But and then we moved to Japan, and it was like, man, now I'm getting sent all over the world still, and I don't get to see him. Like, it was just, I needed something different. Speaking of my oldest, as he's in here sharpening his pencil and staring at me, talk about him. That's,
you got
but I was like, something's got to change. Like, I can't keep doing this, and it just was it was my lunch on a Friday moment where I was like, I need to spend more time with my kids. I can't be a dad without being there, like, sure, you can share the same DNA as somebody, but it doesn't mean that you're like their dad, like actually being supportive of them and being there for them. But so if my math serves me correctly, you said you were married for 12 years. You were in Dubai for a year, did the consulting for a couple of years, and then did the green stuff. So you got married probably while you were doing the energy company. Is that right? Or maybe just after?
Yeah. So, I want to clarify one thing, and hopefully this will be, a good, as we talk about the lunch on a Friday. I was in my 20s. I didn't expect to have lots of leisure time. And I think it is one of the bigger challenges post-pandemic, where you get folks that are early in their career that want to be able to go do, yoga at 3:30 on a Thursday. And maybe your job allows for that, but mostly your job in your 20s is to get your ass kicked and learn as much as humanly possible. And, especially before you have kids, and if you have kids in your 20s, then yes, you want to spend time with them. But like, you need to earn the right to have a little bit of flexibility and freedom. But when I looked at the partners who were in their 50s, who were scoffing at the idea of eating, like taking just an hour on a Friday, that just seems so preposterous to them. That is what really stuck with me. Not that I thought like, oh yeah, I should be able to go do that. I'm 23. Why can't I go take an hour? I really want to jump on that because I really appreciate the clarification, because it's one of those things that, especially like you said, post-pandemic, and right now, I'm a real estate guy, so talking to a bunch of the real estate guys, they seem to think that it's like, oh, I just need to invest for cash flow, live life on the beach, and do all these things. Like, no, you got to work your butt off. Like, you got to do a lot of work to make things happen. And I don't remember who I was just listening to. I wish I could remember. It was like a day or two ago. That's how great my memory is. But he was talking about, obviously, your 20s is like you're just kind of learning what life is at that point. Your 30s, you're working your butt off to actually set things up. 40s is where you really start to be able to narrow in like your strengths and understand how to use them well, and be able to ramp up what you learned in your 20s and 30s, so that your 50s, you could be at that point where you're having lunch on Friday. Like, like you're enjoying that, maybe even on Wednesday too. What a deal. But go through the effort of getting your butt kicked in your 20s and 30s so that you can, be set up well for your 40s, 50s, and so on. So I really appreciate you jumping on that. And as it turns out, most there, I can't remember what article or what it was. It wasn't The Economist, but it was something like that, where they sort of, it was, I think it was Oliver Burkeman who wrote one of the most life-changing books that I've read. He called out this idea, most people are like, I just want to travel the world. I just want to, live on the beach. And as it turns out, like, humans, nearly all of us have a really innate drive for some sort of meaning. And there are a lot of case studies of people who work their tails off to, as quickly as possible, set up a life to where they don't have to be responsible to anyone anywhere. And, they're on a cruise, 300 days a year. And as it turns out, that's pretty lonely, and not actually being a part of anything that matters starts like as an untethered soul. And I certainly love the ability to coach my son's soccer and, take a lunch on a Friday with my wife, which we don't do much of, but like, it is nice to have some level of autonomy and some level of freedom. But to be divorced from all responsibilities, it's actually a really bad thing for almost everybody, evidenced by, all of human history. When people don't have meaning, autonomy, purpose, it really starts to mess with your soul. And you can say that's tethered to religion, you can say it's tethered to biology, whatever it is, you have to be connected to something. And trying to escape any sense of responsibility in life, it's a pretty negative spiral pretty quickly for almost everybody that experiences
and it's a spiral that keeps on going too until something kicks you out of it, right? Like, because oftentimes you're going to live in your own misery and keep on going down that spiral. And not to bring this too awfully political, but it's one of the reasons that I hate the lifetime, gift of a government paycheck, right? Because you lose the sense of purpose, you lose your sense of value, and when you lose your sense of purpose and value, and you're not driving towards something, like, that's just it's innate human nature to need that, and that helps you grow mentally, it helps you grow physically, it helps you like it helps you the longevity, like, it's all just a part of it. And if you're just getting a free paycheck forever and not doing anything, being a part of anything, man, oh man, it's a miserable existence, and it's tough to get out of.
And it deprives people of a core tenet of humanity, of living a life. It's a scary, there's a lot of talk of UBI and everything that's happening with AI. It's a really scary prospect to have a significant portion of the population have no basic set of responsibilities for a whole host of reasons, but most importantly, it actually deprives them of their humanity, and it deprives them of a sense of reason to exist. So I am hoping that those more pernicious ideas are driven out of the mainstream as quickly as possible.
And I think that the pandemic kind of opened my eyes to a little bit of that too, when a lot of people were getting their free government paychecks for a little while, and then they never went back to the workforce, right? Like, they were getting it, and then just, why go back? Like, if I can keep getting the government money. And it's I can't imagine I guess you look at it and go, wow. And now look at the mental health crisis that we're having too, right? Which has been it's been going since before the pandemic, if you ask me. But it was exacerbated certainly with the pandemic. Like, it's like you have all these people stuck in their house getting a free government paycheck with no purpose in life other than to stare at a computer screen. And it's like, wow, we are going to really be in a world of hurt, And I looked at my kids, my oldest especially. He was in school. Yours weren't quite in school yet. But it was like, man, he comes home from school, and now he's home doing school, and he's staring at a computer screen to do school. And I was like, this is going to get worse and worse. And now you look at the after effects of that for years that we're going to be seeing with all these kids. And it's just, I don't know, those are two separate particular incidents, but we got to watch it all firsthand, and I just hope that we learned from it. Whether it's on a societal basis, I don't know, but at least on an individual basis, I hope we learn from it,
Yeah, sometimes I have hope about what we've learned from it. More often than not, it feels like we didn't really learn that much from it. And on a tangent here, it's hard. It's frustrating when I see some of the dialogue about this. Like, there's a social safety net to ensure that people don't die in the street of starvation, and then there's the here's a bunch of stuff for free, and you don't have a sense of responsibility, and it is so often couched in this sense of I care so much about people. Well, you really don't care about them if you are not helping them have any sense of connection or purpose to the world. And that, as a segue back into the world of business, the thing that it took me a little while to kind of learn and experience from both some mentors and some advisors. One of the worst things I experienced in the earliest realm of being a startup founder was when I had to fire somebody. And it felt like I had failed, and you could argue if you've ever had to fire somebody, you failed them in some way. Sure, we could unpack that idea. But it wasn't until a little bit later that I sort of really came to understand and appreciate that the best thing in the world to do, if you care about the people that work for you, is if they're not the right fit for your organization or that role, you're not showing empathy and caring for them by just keeping them around because you're too much of a coward, or it's too hard to fire somebody. And I don't want to say always, because I can't say I've kept in touch with everyone that I've had to let go, but like so many times I saw the people go into another organization and begin to flourish, because whatever it is about that environment, whether it's more structured or less structured or a different type of role, or hey, maybe they're now not a manager, it allowed them to become more of who they are. And it was an environment that allowed them to flourish. And man, what a better fit for them overall. It can be hard to face that, and sometimes they'll never forgive you for it. But I've had it consistently reinforced that if they're not the right fit for the organization, or you're not the right fit to manage them, but you're better in the organization, that you show empathy for that person by helping them move forward into a better fit and a better role, where they can create more of that value and learn more about their own role in an organization and as a human.
No, I cannot emphasize that enough as somebody who also has had to fire multiple people, and it's not a comfortable feeling at all. But again, when it's like, when we're talking about real estate investing or raising capital for a startup or something like that, right? You're not asking for money. You are, when you reframe it and understand that really what you're doing is providing opportunities to folks to see a change in what they, maybe something that they want. When you're letting somebody go, you're not firing them necessarily, like, unless it's for cause. Sometimes you have to fire people for cause, and I'm just firing you, right? Like you're just, but if it's just like there's an alignment issue, right? Like maybe you're just like either it's a core value thing or whatever it is. Like if I've got to let you go, like it's just, you're going to thrive really well in another company. It's just not this one. This is not just the company for you. And I would happily, refer folks all the time. Like if I'm going to let you go, it's so long again as I'm not firing you for cause. But like it. I have been in multiple jobs that I should not be in, right? Like and I don't thrive well doing it, right? I'm like, I can fit in for a moment, but then I can realize, I'm forcing too much here. Like my buddy does this thing called Culture Index. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's like Culture Index. And he, like you can really just see when modeling it, like what it does in getting people to be in the right job. Like, so their mindset, their work ethic, what they're doing is in the right job. And the thriving nature of that person if they're sitting in the right seat. So, again, do the service. Let the person go. Be a flowering, whatever in some other spot, right? They're going to have a hard time blooming where they're planted here, so let's let them get planted somewhere else. I love that. So you go from consulting to energy to, I want to go start companies. Like how did that kind of,
Clothing
like
company,
how did that, I'm working in an energy company and now I want to do clothing. That's an interesting shift.
It's a big shift. The somewhat truncated version there is when I was in college, I had a political internship in DC, which taught me I never wanted to work in politics, which was a good life lesson. But in doing so, I watched a congressional staffer run into a building soaked in sweat. It was the summer, and when his shirt dried off an hour later, he looked even worse. And I grew up playing golf and watched performance polos take over on the golf course, where at first they were deemed unacceptable, and then they became, all of even the stodgiest menswear, guys now wear performance polos when they play golf. And this was many, many, many years ago. So it was this light bulb moment that was, why has no one made a dress shirt out of performance fabrics? And then, I was at the time 18 or 19 and thought, well, if it was such a good idea, someone would have done it. As it turns out, that's not true. And the other thing that I learned eventually was most of the clothing companies had thought about it. It wasn't like I created this idea. They just had a million reasons why they didn't want to do it. And so in 2011, I'd been working at the energy company for about a year and a half ish, maybe 2. Hunt is an amazing company. Several of the leaders have become mentors and investors and friends. But at the time, I was one of a handful of people in the entire organization under the age of 30. Almost everybody was in their 40s. And I looked around me and I didn't really have many peers. And I didn't really see any sort of like, this is what I'm going to do next. And I remember, sort of the lunch moment. I remember thinking, if I were in my 40s, this would be an amazing place to build a career and a family, and like what an incredible place. Great leadership, great organization. But I'm in my early 20s, and if I'm going to take a risk and I'm going to go try and do something, now's the time. Because it was I don't want to say it was the earliest innings of the entrepreneurial boom, but pretty close to it, right? Facebook was, I think, one of the very first big startups in the kind of early 2000s. But sometime around the time I started Mizzen+Main, sometime around then was like Instagram had just been bought for $1 billion, and it was a 2-year-old company. Turns out one of the greatest startup acquisitions ever. But there was just this entrepreneurial boom. And I felt like I'm missing out. I'm working for a great company. I work with great people, and this would be a great place to spend my career. But I think I'm supposed to take my own chance, my own swing here. And so I started tinkering, trying to figure out how to buy fabric, trying to figure out where to get fabric. And at the end of 2011, I had the first prototype made. And then by mid-2012, it got far enough along in the process where I went to my managers at Hunt and just said, like, I know that I'm going to go do this. I'm not actually ready to go do it today, but like I owe it to you and the role that you want me to, like they were ready to move me into a more external facing role. And I just said, like, I don't want you to go introduce me to a bunch of vendors and customers, et cetera, when I know I'm going to leave sometime in the not too distant future. And it was funny, the conversations I had with my bosses at the time, they were like, well, what are you going to go do? And I was like, well, I'm going to go make these shirts. And almost everyone that left Hunt, they went to start a competitor, they went to start a service provider, they went to start like a capital raising thing, all of which were either complementary or competitive to Hunt. And so usually it was like, well, today's your last day. Thank you for everything. And like, we have to, we got to lock your laptop down, et cetera, et cetera. And they were like, okay, when do you need to leave? It was like, honestly, not for probably another month or 2, but like I feel like I have to tell you all that I'm doing this. They're like, okay, well, let us know when you need to go. And so I stayed for another probably 2 months, and then they were so gracious in my departure. They even let me work some consulting hours after I left to help with some income, which was very nice. I sort of made the decision on our honeymoon that I was officially going to leave Hunt and start Mizzen+Main, which was not what my wife signed up for. I had a steady energy company job where I wore a suit and tie and had my life mapped out in front of me. But we had a fast and furious start to our relationship, and it's been 14 years, 12 years of marriage and 2 kids and multiple startups and multiple moves, and none of us could have envisioned the path that was ahead of us, but it's been a hell of a ride together.
Phenomenal. And I just got an entrance from my kid. Speaking of a startup, come here, show me that. Let's see what we got.
Yeah,
show me this. Bring it on. All right. So the Lemony Bros.
Nice.
So they asked me a couple days ago. They said, "Hey, I want to go make more money. How do we earn more money?" Right? And I said, I don't know. So they were trying to figure out how to earn more money from mom and dad. And I was like, okay, let's figure out how to earn money from other people. That'd be great. So, I mean, we can keep the money in the house, but at the same point, I'd like to keep the money in my bank account. So they were like, oh, let's do, of course, the classic lemonade stand. So we're going through some ideas. And we had talked back and forth about, I told him, I said, all right, so this lemonade stand is going to get you a customer one time, maybe multiple times if you keep going out there. How can you keep bringing those customers back? So now we're creating ideas on how to have them be multi-use customers, not just for a glass of lemonade. So we're working on that. So one of the thoughts that I gave them, and we'll see if they do it, is like create like a little pamphlet that says, hey, like you get a free cup of lemonade, free glass of lemonade, and I'm going to give you a pamphlet. And in this pamphlet, it's going to tell you these services that I can provide you for your house. And that way, maybe it's taking the trash out every week, right? I'm going to bring your trash to the curb and bring it back to your house every week. $5, $10 a week. You get 10 houses in our neighborhood that do that. I mean, that's $100 a week if you charge $10, So now I'm trying to get them to think of other things. And they came up with Lemony Bros for the name of their stand. Yesterday, they made $53 on their lemonade stand, which was awesome. Somebody paid $20 for a $2 glass of lemonade, so that works out all right. But yeah, good job on your guys' startup. Let's see how it goes as we continue doing this. They think, though, that if they go out there every day, they're going to make $53 every day. And I was like, we're Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, sorry. But we're going to learn quickly supply and demand. I don't think the demand is going to be there for every day. But
now, are you charging rent allocation for their portion of the household?
I have not charged them rent for their portion of the household yet. I did make them pay me back, of course, for the supplies. And I told them I was going to charge interest. And then this one, Rourke, he says, I think that the money that we made, we should use that for the supplies next time. So we don't have to give you any money, Dad. And I was like, you didn't really give me any money, but you're right. That's how we're going to do this. You make money. You use it for supplies. As long as you keep your profit margin strong, you're going to be doing great. So we'll work on building that profit margin and teach you guys how to do spreadsheets, huh, buddy?
It's awesome.
Yeah, dude. All right, now go get back to work so I can get back to it. Love you guys. Thanks for showing up and thanks for showing off your Lemony Bros sign you made. I love you guys. So they wanted to make sure that counted as one of their classes. So that was art class, is them creating their Lemony Bros sign. But Rourke, can you shut the door, please, bud? Yes. Thanks, dude. I absolutely love homeschooling, by the way. It's exhausting, it's mentally draining, but it's phenomenal.
You're doing full homeschooling? Yeah.
It's like I did a road trip to Denver a couple weeks ago for my company's conference. And we drove from Florida all the way to Denver, kids in the back of the car. My littlest, she's only one. My wife and her flew, so we didn't have them drive. But me and the boys, yeah.
Good call.
Yeah. We've done long road trips with her. She does pretty well, but it just takes so much longer when you have to pull over 77 times, whether it's a peed diaper or, just like a child being one and needing to get out of the car seat, But the kids are in the back. They're doing their schoolwork. We're getting to see cool sights. We're stopping and playing in hotel pools and playing. It was wonderful. I absolutely loved it. And the flexibility that the homeschool stuff provides is great. It'll be even better when my wife retires next year and she can be the one to do the homeschool, or at least support. Yes.
More of that, yeah.
But then, obviously they got to build this little lemonade stand yesterday too, which is great. Like that's something that when school was getting out and everybody was coming through, they were already set up at the gate of our neighborhood, waiting for people to drive through. So it was like perfect timing. Like you're all set up, and it was great to watch. But I love doing this stuff. But I want to go back. You when you were dating your wife, so you said you were dating for 2 years and you were in the energy company, right? Is that the whole time you were in the energy company? All right. So you're dating her while hanging out in the energy company. What kind of conversations did you have about what the future was going to look like that suddenly changed on the honeymoon?
It was one of the in one of our early first dates. I had talked about this idea for what has become Mizzen+Main, but we just sort of riffed on it and talked about it. But then we got married April 21st, 2012, and then went on our honeymoon. And it had just reached this point where it was, I'm going to do this. It's time, and she definitely had some level of apprehension, understandably and appropriately, but basically said, you know what, let's go see what we can do here. And she, I don't think that we had sort of said like, well, this is what's going to happen at age 25. This is what's going to happen at age 27. But but it seemed like a relatively straightforward life. And then this thing started to snowball, and I've been tinkering on it for, over a year. And then when I stepped down, it was her income. She worked at a nonprofit that kept us afloat as a family for almost 2 years. And, she would take vacation days to come to our trade shows and work the trade show booths with me. And, some asshole buyer would come by and basically just be terrible to us about our product. And I just sort of was like, well, they don't know what they're doing. They're not good at their job, and I will displace them and we will win. And she had to go into the bathroom and cry a little bit and then come back out, because it was all of my savings were in the company. We bet so much on the company. And it took about 2 years for things to really start to materialize. Like, we did about $50,000 in 2012 in the second half of the year. We did about $250,000 the next year. And then in 2014, we did $1 million, and things were, that's a real business. Things are really starting to roll. And at that point in time, she came on board as our CMO, because that was her background, was advertising. And so we actually got to work together to build the company. Like, she did a lot of stuff unpaid for years to help. But then she came on board full time. And I will tell you, it is one of the most wonderful blessings in our marriage that we got to do that together, because we spent obviously every day together and almost every minute of every day together. And we could go to trade shows and we could travel together. And there was no, hey, it's 7:00. We're not going to talk about work anymore. Like, this is our startup. This is our life. And so we could talk about it all the time. And we did. And we only had 2 somewhat big fights about the business. I probably should have given up on one of them, and I was definitely right on the other one. And it worked. And then ultimately our son was born. She came back to work, and around the time our son was 1, she just said, I'm not your CMO anymore. Like, this business deserves somebody who is all in, and I don't want to do this. I want to be at home with our kids, at our son at the time. And so, it was a really special thing to get to work together as long as we did. I'm very grateful that we did. I would generally advise almost everyone I know not to work with their spouse. Like, it is a very unique blend to make that work. Your personalities need to be aligned to complement each other in the right way. And not to say that people don't have complementary personalities, but to work together is a very unique dance. But I felt like it was a great competitive advantage for us. We had a hell of a run working together, and then a couple years later, we had our second child, and she has become just, I'm in awe every day of her as a mother, because she genuinely loves it. It is what she is meant to do. It's what she wants to do. And it is really hard work. Kids are amazing, but it's a lot harder. It's a lot harder to raise kids than it is to do business. And I'm very grateful that this is what she wants to do.
I can't tell you, like, it makes me super happy to hear that, and the way you guys work together well, and how I can't wait. There was a day, so my wife was, so she's in the military. I think I already said that, but she retires next year, and there's been some talk back and forth about whether or not she was going to retire, because she has a very high likelihood of making the next rank, which to make colonel, to make 06, is a pretty awesome deal in the military, right? And she had a really good shot at making it. And there was just one day where she was just kind of sitting, and we've been talking back and forth. And if she were to strictly ask me my opinion, no, you're done. I have zero desire to stay around the military service anymore. Like, I'm done after my 18 years, after your 20 years. I'm just tired of it. But it's rather enticing to do that. But then one day she was just sitting at the dinner table. She looked around. She was like, I just want to be a mom. Like, I just want to be home. Like, I just want to be around my kids. Yeah. And I was like, that is like, it makes me like happier than than a pig in stuff, as they say. But like super thrilled to do that. And I can't wait to watch her just kind of be a present mom and hang out with the kids and, be able to travel as much as we want to and go to the places. And, again, like travel to, it won't be trade shows for me, but, I guess you never know what I'm going to start next. So maybe it'll be trade shows, who knows? But to be able to travel around with me and go look at properties and go do different things and just, man, I'm so excited for that. I am jealous that you already have it and I don't yet, but in a good way jealous, not in an envious way jealous.
Well, it'll be a big adjustment, as it is to, any major life change, career change is a big adjustment. There's no right way to raise a family. And this is a big part of, like, I wouldn't advise most people to work together. It needs to be the right fit for what you want as a person. And some people, they feel that right balance is to be a working mom. Yeah. And for some, it's to be full-time with kids. To each their own. People need to raise their kids in the best way that they can see fit. And in some cases, some parents don't have a choice. It's literally a matter of economics, and they just can't make a choice. For Jen and I, one of the things that we met and I proposed about 6 months later. It was a very, very fast experience, moving to that level. But she said on one of our first dates, we were just talking about the life that we wanted to build as individuals. Like, it was pretty apparent very early on we were gonna be together for a long time. But she said, just the way that my mom raised me, I know that what I want in this life is to be a mom and to raise my kids the way that my mom raised me. And that was what I wanted to find in a partner as well. And so we knew that was what we wanted early, and we had a really cool run together. And seeing her grow as a mom and seeing her manage the chaos of being a mom has been really wonderful. I feel very, very fortunate.
And I love that you guys had those conversations early. I had a call with a buddy of mine. By the time this comes out, well, his girlfriend doesn't listen to it, but he's planning to ask her to get married. And he was like, hey, like, what do I, he was asking for advice. Like, what kind of things should I be thinking about that I don't know yet? What kind of conversation should I be having? Yeah. And I was telling him, you need to have every single conversation you possibly can, every hard conversation, every easy conversation, know each other inside and out, so that there aren't surprises later on, that it's not, that you guys know that your future, what you want as an individual for your future and what she wants as an individual in the future is not, they're not counteracting each other, right? Like, you have to know that you're in, and it's the same thing we talk about with people in businesses. Like, if when I'm talking real estate stuff, I'm like, hey, if I'm going to partner with somebody on a real estate deal, like, I want to hold this thing for 15 years and, refinance it 3 times in that period, but you want to hold it for 5 and be out. Well, that's not very good alignment. We might not want to be, we may have, like, we may go to the same church, have kids the same age, be like really good friends. Yeah,
you could be best friends.
If that's not an alignment, then it's not a good business partnership, right? So, again, the same thing with your spouse. And I advise folks just have every conversation you can. And I love talking to folks about how to. I've been married for 15 years, and it's one of those that's we've been through the ringer. We've lived in the same house together. We've lived in different countries. Like, it's like, I've been through anything and everything you could think of just about. And it's like there's a lot that you can learn from it. One thing I do, this is not a judgment, so please don't take it that way, whether you or anybody listening. I hate how easy it is to get a divorce these days because everybody wants to give up so quickly. Mm-hmm. And it's one of those that if you haven't strengthened the communication side of it to begin with, then of course one of the things is going to be divorce, like, because you have an inability to communicate. And this goes back to what we talked about even with the COVID stuff. Like, everybody's so used to sitting on a screen, not being interacting in person, all this stuff. So then, like, when you finally do interact and all this, like, well, now I don't know how to actually have a conversation with you on things that, like, aren't working, or how to get through things. And it's like, man, oh man, like, start with a basis of actually communicating with each other and building a strong connection with each other and knowing that you guys are in alignment. It'll make a huge difference. And like you said, within 6 months, you already knew. I was the same way with my wife. I knew almost immediately, like, that I was going to marry her. She didn't have a clue yet. She was still running away, but I knew that it was going to happen. So
what was it that made you know so early?
There are a few things. One is we just had a really strong alignment in a lot of that stuff that you talked about. And, we weren't like dating. We were just talking a lot, and it was, chatting back and forth about different things. And then before you know it, I was like, boy, this is this is almost exactly who I was looking for. Because like when I first met her, I was dating somebody else, and like so it wasn't there, but it was like a just the conversations we had, and then I broke up with with the person I was dating, and it just kind of kept going, and I got out of the military the first time, and I was going to college there, and we got married when I was at college, and it was like I just knew, like I called my mom, and I didn't talk to my mom about anything with dating, and that leads back to a lot of conversations that she and I had before that made me not want to say anything about dating at all, right? But I finally was like, I need to call my mom, and she was like, all right, well, you got to sit down, you got to pray about it, and that was not what I wanted to hear. I wanted to hear, great job, Adam, I'm really looking forward to this. But then, I'm a Christian, my wife's a Christian, we're raising our kids the same way, and so I sat there and prayed one night, and I was like, if this isn't meant, like, help me to never be able to talk to her again. Like, just show me quickly. And the next morning I woke up and I was like, nah, I'm marrying her. I just knew it. Like, I knew that I was going to marry her. Like, it was such a weird... Oh, my son's got a question in the back.
What else?
It's important.
Oh, can we talk about selling at the lemonade stand later? I thought you had a question about my story. Go get back to your business planning workshop over here, buddy. But yeah, I mean that for me, I mean it was super important to hear that from my mom, even though I didn't want to, and then pray about it and go, yeah, like I totally know this is happening. So, and for you, how was it like within 6 months? How did you feel like within 6 months? Like usually that's an odd thing when I tell people that I knew that quickly, and here you are, same boat. Like how did you kind of figure that out? What was your insight?
Oh, I mean, I proposed after 6 months. I bought a ring after 2.5 months. I had been in several long-term relationships across high school and college and after college, like several multi-year relationships. And by no means did I have life figured out in my early 20s, but I had dated extensively and I saw what I didn't want to have happen again. And so after our first date, it was pretty clear that this was the person I was going to marry. Like I knew it. And so then over the next couple of times that we spent time together, I asked every question about how she saw the world, how she saw her family, how she saw wanting to have a family, what did she want out of life. And every one of the questions was like, this is everything I've ever looked for. And I've experienced when I thought I liked somebody, but like I hadn't really asked those tough questions. And I could also see, and it's true, we absolutely love spending time together, and we enjoy spending time together more now than we did 15 years ago, effectively at the start of the honeymoon phase, which is everything's fun and easy when you're, in your mid 20s and, you don't have to worry about much. And so, we pushed really hard for, I think each of us sort of knew, like, we got to know right away. And we ended up on a several-hour road trip after we'd been together for like 2 weeks. And I was like, by the end of this road trip, I'm going to know. And I didn't hold back in asking anything. And the other piece was we talked about relationships that we saw in our own lives, in our families, and with friends, of what we didn't like and what we did like. And recently we've had some conversations with friends whereby it's shocking to hear that there are couples who genuinely don't like each other. Like they're married, they're fine. It's not like they live in some sort of abusive household, but they just actually don't like each other. And they raise kids and, that's that. But given the chance, they would choose spending time with other people 10 times out of 10. And that is such a sad thing to hear, because life can be so much better. And I would love to one day learn more about, like, did they just give up early on trying to maintain the friendship? Did they never really have that to begin with? And they just, they were attracted to each other and they just sort of like fell into every next phase of life. I'm sure it's different for different people, but I love spending time with my wife. And sure, I have hobbies that I enjoy. I play golf by myself and with friends, and I've got some great friends that I love spending time with, but like I'm not escaping my wife or my life. And that is one of the things, as we talk about like looking back on how I was raised and how I'm raising kids, man, most important thing that I can think to set my children up for success is the ability to know themselves and find a partner to make life infinitely richer. If we do that, where they work, how much money they make, what part of the country do they live, those are just so much less important if they know themselves and they find the partner to do life with.
I can't beat that drum enough. No, I really appreciate you saying that. And that's one of the reasons I encourage everybody to start with that basis of communication and start with that understanding of each other and being open and honest, and don't leave a stone unturned, because again, if you just follow the pattern of date for a little bit, we've been around together for a little while, I guess it's time to get married, or my mom is asking me when I'm going to pop the question, or she's whatever it is, like, man, oh man, like, it has to be what makes sense for you two. So I love it. When it comes to raising the kids, especially, raising kids as an entrepreneur is not exactly, your normal, just every day, working 9 to 5, coming home. How have you guys been discussing raising kids, and how has it changed since pre-kids? Like, this is how I want to raise kids versus post-kids. This is how we actually raise kids.
What's the saying? Everybody has a plan until they
Mike
get punched
Tyson.
in the mouth.
Thank you.
Yeah. I would say I didn't really have a whole lot of plans or thoughts as to this is how it's going to go when it comes to kids, because I just hadn't really spent much time around any kids. My sister had, I think, 2 kids before I had our first. And so, you're around the nieces and nephews a little bit, but I'd never changed a diaper. I'd never babysat. I'd never had any level of responsibility there. I knew I wanted kids, but I think the most important things that I've learned have been sort of from outside of having kids, and how I've tried to apply them into raising kids, which is largely around being grateful to be able to spend time with them, and that the time that I spend with them and the impact that I have on them is meaningfully more important than anything else that I do. It doesn't mean that I don't forget that plenty of times, or I don't get frustrated or distracted, or fall into I don't know, I'm just tired. I don't really want to go do X, Y, or Z. But we have such a freaking short period of time with our kids as kids. My wife and I and some of our good friends have really laughed at, I heard from so many of my, friends, mentors, whatever, that were older, the years are long, but the days are short, or the days are long, but the years are short. That's what it is. And when someone says that to you, and you haven't slept in 2 days because your kid has a fever and they're screaming and you're just absolutely strung out, there's a part of you that's thank you, that's so helpful. I'm just barely holding on to my sanity right now. But as they get out of the toddler phase, it's a little bit easier to keep your head above water. They start to be able to argue with you in a different way, which presents new challenges. But my overarching effort in life to sort of find and continue to pursue meaning and purpose and be grateful for the days that we have has really helped me value just the day-to-day. Yes, I took your kids to Disney World 18 months ago, and that was one of the most magical things ever. Also exhausting and stressful and expensive. But I'm a part of a forum. We've been a part of it for I've been in a forum for 8 years, 7 other entrepreneurs and dads. And one of the questions we asked was on your deathbed, if you could go back to a moment in time, what moment would you pick? And it really wouldn't be Disney World. Yeah. It would be the days that we built a sandcastle for 3 hours at the beach, or the Sunday morning where, it's raining and the kids climb into bed and we just lay around and talk and laugh for a half an hour before the day starts. And that understanding and getting help and support from friends and reading about, life and how you spend your time has helped me frame, I really try to hold on to those moments as they're happening and know how special that is. And, sure, we're planning the next family vacation, and that's going to be great because I like doing those types of things and experiencing adventure. But watching my son run his first cross country race with the level of pride in himself of like how much he loves it, that is what to me feels more important than just about anything else I do.
Yeah, out of curiosity, what is this forum that you speak of? Because this sounds intriguing.
So there are lots of different groups that create forums, EO, YPO, Vistage, generally business leaders with different types of backgrounds. I joined a group called EO, I guess it was 9 years ago, and almost 9 years ago. And I was placed in a forum. So there are 8 of us. And as it happens, it's 8 guys who had each started their own business. Most of us actually dropped out of EO. We just weren't able to put the time into it to get the money out that we had been paying. But we stayed together as a forum. And so forums take different shapes and structures. But basically, one day a month, we will get together for 4 or 5 hours and give each other life updates, give presentations on business challenges that we're facing, life challenges that we're facing. And across the 8 years that we've been together, a couple guys have sold their businesses. Some people have had to shut their businesses down. Some of us have left the things that we started and are doing something else. Multiple kids have been born. There's been a divorce. And it's experiencing life together with a group of fellow, in our case, it's all entrepreneurs. YPO, you don't have to be an entrepreneur. The premise of a forum is there are some things that it's hard to talk to your spouse about. There are some things you can't talk to your employees or your business partners about. There's a lot of things that your friends just will never understand because it's not that anything is better or worse, but they've never signed the back of a paycheck. And when you do all of their front of a paycheck, when you do all of that together, when you put all of that together, if you construct a forum properly, it can be the greatest force for kind of life acceleration and reflection imaginable. And I find that most forums are like, oh yeah, it's good. I learn a lot. Our forum, we've been together for 8 years, and it's my best friends and wouldn't want to experience life with anyone else. And it's rare to get that type of a bond. But the reflection that comes with that, we do a retreat once a year where you look back on the prior year. What did I say I wanted to accomplish? What did I accomplish from a personal and very importantly, from a professional perspective? It's like a personal board of directors that can, help you with your personal life, but can help drive you on your business side. That has helped me in innumerable ways over both Mizzen+Main and now Harbor as well.
I absolutely love it. Yeah, I'm in a group called GoBundance. It's very, we have pods, right? So it's similar to the forum side of the house where you get together with the guys, and it's it's going with that. You are the 5 people you're around most, right? So if you can strive to be around solid, hard-hitting guys that are doing what they can to help each other out, I mean, that's like you become a solid, hard-hitting guy that's doing what they can to help help each other out. So I absolutely love it. I love the concept. I love how you've integrated that for the last 8 years. That's phenomenal that group has stayed together that long. That's really awesome. So I do want to go into, as a guy that has 3 kiddos, into the baby monitor remote nighttime nannies. What was it called? What'd you call it? Yeah, remote night nanny. I'm very interested in how this kind of came about. You said, I think at the beginning, you alluded to your camera failing you or something along those lines. So talk to me about how this kind of idea struck you and you started developing it.
So it was in the throes of our private equity fundraise with Mizzen+Main when my son was born. So a very memorable point in time in my life. I signed the term sheet for El Catterton's investment, our PE firm, in the delivery room for my son. And I'd done a bunch of research on, trying to support my wife and on anything that I could, but where I felt like I could help was like, I'm going to make sure we get the best stroller. I'm going to make sure we get the best tech. I'm going to make sure we get the best gear because that's what I can go figure out. Nanit is a Wi-Fi camera with an app on your phone, and they call it a baby monitor, but it is not a baby monitor. It's a Wi-Fi camera with an app on your phone. And they've got a bunch of press and a bunch of awards for all their innovation. And really, it's like Nester Ring with some, functionality for babies, for watching babies. And so I didn't realize how limited it was because everything that I read was glowing, and we got it. And then my son was, I don't know, a month or two old. He was in his own room, and I woke up one morning. You're just supposed to leave the audio running on your cell phone. I don't like sleeping next to my phone for a whole host of reasons, physical and mental. But I had to sleep next to it. That's fine. And I woke up one morning and the app had just crashed. And when an app crashes on your phone, it can't tell you that it crashed because it's not working. And so in that experience, I ran upstairs and my son was fine. Kids are more resilient than we give them credit for, but it's the nature of things. And I went out and bought an old school Motorola camera and an old school Motorola monitor. And that way I had a dedicated device that didn't need internet. And most importantly, those old school devices, they're junk, but like they will alert you if you lose connection. We kept a Wi-Fi camera because we had a nanny when my wife came back to work at Mizzen+Main. And, with a babysitter, I want to be able to just have a measure of security, be able to record and rewind. That was almost 8 years ago, and still to this day, no one has solved that problem of you need two different types of systems. And all of the Wi-Fi cameras, the Nest, the Owlet, all of those devices, they don't have a physical monitor that will alert you if you've lost connection. And there's a lot of drawbacks to not having that physical monitor as well, which is like, I want to, when a babysitter comes, hand them the device to watch the child. I don't want them to have access to my account. I don't want to give them one of my iPhones that's unlocked so that they can access our Nanet. That's weird. It's not good from a security perspective. And then I want to be able to record and rewind. I want to be able to use an app, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that was where the idea came from. And so what we've built is a camera and a 10-inch monitor that connect directly to each other without internet. So you can use it when you travel, when you're in a hotel. You can't use any of these Wi-Fi cameras with hotel Wi-Fi or anything like that. But it also, both devices also connect to the cloud. So you get an app on your phone, you can record, you can rewind. And then from a security perspective, on the camera itself, we have an AI chip and a memory chip. So what that means is all of our advanced AI detection, cry detection, face up, face down, all the features, some of which we have already and some of which we will continue to roll out, all of that is done at the edge offline. We do not process your footage. It does not go through our servers. So from a security perspective, that's unparalleled. And then the memory chip in the camera means all of your memories are stored on the camera locally. We do not store your footage. And that is also very helpful because from a security, from a data breach perspective, that matters. The last piece on the security side is our cameras are made outside of China with non-Chinese silicon and non-Chinese firmware. We're recording this in the middle of November. There's a lot of stuff that's just happened with the election and a lot of stuff that's going to happen with China and tariffs. We already weren't producing in China because we wanted to be able to ensure the best level of security for our customers. So that's the camera and the monitor product. We just started shipping this fall. We've shipped thousands of devices. Customers have loved the product. That's the foundation for a platform that we've built called the Remote Night Nanny. So if you can afford a night nanny, for those listeners who aren't really familiar with it, it's someone who comes into your house from, call it, 9 or 10 p.m. until 6 or 7 a.m., and they take care of your child overnight. So they will help with sleep training. They'll help with bottles. If you're bottle feeding or if your wife is nursing, then they'll bring the child to your wife to nurse, and then they'll bring them back and burp them, change them, put them back to bed. And it's one of life's greatest blessings if you can afford it, but almost no one can afford it. And a lot of people that can't afford it don't want someone else caring for their child in the middle of the night. Or they heard a horror story where a night nurse or night nanny fell asleep on the job. And then in a lot of the country, even if you can afford one and you want one, you can't find one, right? In a lot of cities, it's very hard to find a reputable, trusted resource that you would feel comfortable having come into your house. And so $300 to $700 a night, depending on where you are in the country, is a good kind of gauge. New York or LA, you're talking $600-700 a night if you can even find one. And Dallas, it's $300 to $400 a night. What we can do, because we built the hardware and because we built the software, is if you want overnight help, you can turn over the controls of your monitor to our professionally trained night nurses, who will turn the volume on your monitor up or down for you and only wake you up when it's time for you to go in. So, of course, if something is wrong, or once a certain basic time threshold is met based on the age and stage of your child, there's a huge misunderstanding, misnomer about this idea of letting your child cry, where really bad sleep consultants and sleep influencers will say you never have to let your child cry at night. Well, that's a recipe for disaster. And your child's only mean of communication is crying. And just because they're crying doesn't mean that something is actually really wrong. It's also them just saying, hey, what's going on here? And if you allow your child to train you that anytime they cry, you are in there holding their hand, then they're not going to learn how to sleep. And you will actually delay their immune support, their regulation support, like their motor skill. All of those things are formed with healthy sleep. And so what we do is make it so that you will only wake up when it's time for you to go in. And we're talking 5, 10, 15-minute intervals. So if your child is 4, 5, 6 months old, really, it's very safe, very normal. It's healthy from an emotion perspective to let them cry for 10 or 15 minutes. And so if they cry for 6 or 7 minutes and stop, that's great. They're learning the skill of sleeping. It is a skill literally like standing up, walking, talking. These are skills that they have to learn, and they are capable of learning. But what a lot of parents face, and if you're a parent, you know this, but if you're not a parent, you don't know, you could do all the right things and not go into your child's room, but maybe once the entire night. But they can cry for 2 minutes and stop. 15 minutes later, they'll cry for 2 minutes and stop. 25 minutes later, 2 minutes and stop. And what that means is you as the parent are getting zero deeper REM sleep, because it takes time to get into those sleep cycles. And so then you are fried as a parent, you're fried as a spouse, you're fried as an employee, you're fried as a business owner. And frankly, like, it's dangerous for you to be in a car because you're much more likely to have these micro sleeps. And so for as low as $20 a night, and in 2024, we're giving this away for free for 2 weeks, we will, when you hand over the controls, we will only wake you up as a parent when it's time for you to wake up. And it is a fantastic second set of eyes and ears to be supportive to you as a parent. And we've worked with many dozens of families now who have told us things like, you gave me hope to have a third child. I haven't slept since my first trimester. And like, at first, what we find is the first night, parents are like, okay, this is a little bit different, right? Like the first time you get into an Uber, it was a little bit strange. You're getting in a stranger's car. But on the second night, we almost universally hear from, especially the moms, who say, oh my God, I can finally sleep. And it's not because they're just not hearing something. It's that they have an expert who is a nurse who is telling them what to do. So it's not even just that I'm not hearing it. It's that I can breathe because someone who's an expert in this is telling me how best to navigate this very difficult time.
Yeah, that's boy, there's like 7 things in there that I love about that. One, I was a former counterintelligence guy, so everything I was looking at on my monitors was always what's made in China, what's not, what's connected to the internet. So I chose not to have anything that's connected to the internet at all because of some of those fears of the security of all of that, how all that goes. Yeah. And 2, the need to understand what is an acceptable length of a cry and what the different cries are in a child, right? Because there are different, you can hear it in if you're paying attention, which when you're sleeping, you're not really paying attention. You just hear it and you get up, right? Because you're not paying attention to what that type of cry is. You're just like, oh, I heard it. I know that I need to do something. So you get up and do something. It's almost like you're a robot at that point because there's no thinking through it. So I love that, that you're kind of working a way to allow that process to happen, and telling moms and dads that it is okay to let your kid cry sometimes. That still takes some convincing, regardless of how many times they hear it. But the fact that you have nurses telling them, I love that thought process. And you've done with both of your businesses what you're doing, and I'm hoping that people hear this, is you see an issue, you chase it down. Too many times my wife and I have seen issues and we're like, oh, somebody should totally do that. And then we did the same thing that you said about your shirt. Somebody surely would have already done this if it was needed. Yeah. And then you put it to the back of your mind and you move on. But you didn't do that. You went, no, like this is how things are created. This is how things are developed. As somebody sees a problem and they go and fix it. And then you went and did something about it. and I know we don't have a ton of time, but with both of these things, I'm curious because they're both, like you said at the beginning, they seem not to align with each other, but they do, and so do the backstory of how it happened, how it came about. So how did you get yourself to convince yourself that this is something that is worth putting the money in? Because I can almost guarantee these aren't the only two ideas that you've had for companies that you want to develop. It just you seem like the kind of guy who probably has 77 ideas, and you write them. Some of them you write down, some of them you don't. So I'm like, how did you go? These are the two things I totally need to chase down versus any of the other ones that you've had.
So I will confess, I don't feel like I've actually had that many ideas. I've had a couple others that I think could be interesting. With Mizzen+Main, I will say it was really the first idea that I was like, this is something that should exist. Since then, I've learned to look at the world, I think, a little bit differently, and how I can create value and find white space. With Mizzen+Main, it was, we talked a little bit about it earlier. I wanted to be a part of something. I was working for a great company, and then it was, okay, I want to go try this myself. And when I started Mizzen+Main, I had no real professional chops. I was a management consultant for 2 years and an investment analyst for 2 years. I'd never interviewed somebody, let alone hired them or managed a P&L. And I was sort of thinking to myself, if I try this and I fail in 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, I will be infinitely more valuable as an employee for the rest of my life. Because look at how much I will learn in that process. I briefly toyed with the idea of going to business school as a bridge to get into the startup world. And then I was like, well, I don't know, this seems like a pretty good idea. And I will say with Mizzen+Main, a big difference versus Harbor is I told almost no one about my idea because I was terrified someone was going to take it. And so I didn't really have a lot of data points, but I did just sort of say, like, I really think that people would prefer to wear a shirt that's stretched. I like golf shirts more than cotton shirts. And then when I finally had the first shirt made, it was a very long journey to get the first one made. I went home from my energy company, suit and tie, like stepping out in the fashion world at this energy company was wearing a cornflower blue shirt instead of a white shirt. And so when I had the first shirt made, I was on my way home. I picked up the first shirt. It was white. It was a local seamstress that made it for me. And I walked in the front door, and my wife, at the time, my fiance and I were living together. And our dog had knocked something over and made a big mess. And I was wearing the prototype shirt. I didn't tell her I was picking it up, but I was wearing the prototype shirt. And I stood there in the front door, kind of waiting to see her reaction. And she didn't say anything. She was just staring at me. And I was staring at her. And she said, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Well, what do you think?" And she said, "What do I think about you helping me clean up this mess?" And the dog had really made a mess. And I was like, "No, what do you think about the shirt?" And she didn't realize it wasn't my normal white, suit and tie, buttoned up, oil company shirt. And that was a big moment because I've thought about the idea for years and years and years and years. Would it work? I don't know. And this was she knew what I was working on, and she didn't look at me and go, "What the hell is that? That looks terrible." Like, no. And then that night or the next day, we went and celebrated Christmas with her family who knew what I was working on, and I wore the shirt. And at the end of the night, I told them, "Hey, this is the first prototype." And all of them, their jaws hit the floor. They're like, "Oh my God, this is going to work. Like, if we didn't look at you and wonder what the hell are you wearing, this is really going to work." And so that was really okay, I have to give this a shot. I really think that this could work. And part of my long-term thinking was, if it doesn't work, it will be like, I'm probably going to spend as much money as I would spend going to business school. And I think I'm going to be more valuable having literally started my own company. And then with Harbor, I thought about it since my, Nanit crashed on us and we wanted to have something better. And I just sort of kept thinking, like, my God, how much money people spend for their kids, and the baby registries where people won't blink at dropping $1,500 on a stroller that they will use for a very short period of time. And here I am hacking together multiple pieces of technology, and this is the leader in the space. And so it was the similar kind of hole in the market. And as opposed to Mizzen+Main, I started telling everybody I met about what I wanted to do. And I asked every parent, what did they use and what didn't they like? And then when I started to get a little more serious about it, I basically said, I need to understand why no one is making this product. And so I talked to everyone that I could meet that had ever built any piece of hardware, any electronics. I found my way to a couple people who had deep knowledge and experience in the space. My network was one of the things that I had spent 15 years building, and it was a really robust network. And then I sort of started poking through LinkedIn, and I found a guy, his name's Scott Miller. He built the first 4 million Roombas for iRobot. Like, that was what he did. And since then, his title on LinkedIn is, I help people take prototypes into mass production. And he listed all the companies that he worked with. And I was like, damn, that is somebody that I need to meet. And one of my friends was connected to him on LinkedIn. And I said, I want to talk to Scott. And I talked to Scott, and I talked him through the idea. And he goes, yeah, there's no reason you can't do that. I'm like, all right, well, then that's like, okay, I could do it. So then I kept going down the line. And ultimately, the reality is, investors just don't think you can make enough money selling a piece of hardware to a family. And they are both right and wrong, because if you're selling a total piece of junk, commoditized, like cost down, that's going to break from China, you're right. You can't make enough money, because someone is always going to rip off a cheaper version of that device. And people are always going to be seeking the lowest possible price, or they're going to be seeking the best product that you can have. And so our second piece of this really ended up becoming this idea for the remote night nanny, because I had talked to so many people. And then it became clear to me, the opportunity isn't just to sell people a piece of hardware, it's to sell people sleep, and to sell people coaching and expertise and telehealth and all the things that parents need. I think that we can solve a lot of them if we start by being the baby monitor that they trust every single day for multiple years across multiple children. And, you know, I'll get off my soapbox here in a second. The last thing I'll say is the story, I don't know if you've ever heard the story of how Ring doorbell started. Jamie Siminoff and I think it's his cousin were working on some other startup idea, something to do with like gardening technology. And they were working in the back porch or in the back garage or something. And they kept missing deliveries for this thing that they were tinkering on. And Jamie said to his cousin or some family member, hey, run to Best Buy and get like a video doorbell so we can see if someone's like, so we don't miss these packages. And he's like, yeah, that's a good idea. I should go get it. And he went, and lo and behold, there was no such thing as a video doorbell. And they built a video doorbell to not miss packages for this thing that they were tinkering on. And apparently it was either Jamie's girlfriend or wife walked out one day and goes, you idiots, that's the product. Like, stop tinkering with your garden thing. Like, that's the product. And as it turned out, a lot of people assumed I can't make enough money selling some like video doorbell thing. But when it came to what if you pay us $60 a year to store all of your footage, that's a 10-year lifetime value customer. Actually, there's a really good business there. And so there's a lot of reasons why existing frames of reference don't want to pursue an idea. But if you rethink the approach, which is really often only possible as an outsider, there's a totally different way to tackle most of the problems that people don't think are solvable.
I mean, it goes right into Lemony Bros, right? Like, how do you have a recurring customer, right? Like, it's not if it's just a one-time transactional thing, then you've got to keep on going. Yes, babies are still getting born all the time, but that's tough. But when you get that MRR going and you get, the lifetime value of a customer going up and up and up, like that's where it's at when it comes to business and valuation, of course, if you're trying to sell this thing, right, as a business. So, no, I love it. Go ahead.
Maybe a last thought on the business. I know we're wrapping up in a minute. Last thought on the business. The other reason why I decided to pursue Harbor, I had the good fortune several years ago of getting to meet Jordan Peterson and learn, like, we had an awesome conversation.
Jealous.
And it was fantastic. But something that he said really stuck with me. We were talking about somebody else, but he was reinforcing for me Maslow, because you know he studies everybody, but Maslow, the central point that Maslow had in kind of building a meaningful life is what one can be, one must be. If you know you are capable of something and you don't pursue that disconnect, that tension is terrible. It is literally hell for a lot of people. And I had a lot of success with Mizzen+Main, but like not all the way. You know, we haven't sold the company. We have private equity behind us. It's been a great ride, but it's not like, you know, I was sitting on the beach somewhere because I had some sort of, sold the company for billions of dollars. That hadn't happened. The business is still going very well, but I'm in my mid-30s and I have this idea for something that I feel like can change people's lives. And now I'm learning and I learned the first time around that I'm actually pretty good at coming up with a product idea, finding a way to build it, even though people say you can't or you shouldn't, and then building a team, raising capital, and figuring out how to get people to want to buy the product. And I just felt like I couldn't not pursue building Harbor. It has been much harder than I expected. I thought it would be a little easier the second time around. I was both right and wrong. But I felt like I had to. It's been, some days I question my sanity in doing a second startup. But a lot of the time, like, I know it's this hard in the beginning, and eventually things start to turn. And then everyone looks back and goes, oh my God, I can't believe how easy that must have been for you. Like, if you only knew.
No, that is one I definitely had to write down. What one can be, one must be. And I've heard Jordan talk about stuff like that before, and it's I can't tell you how perfect timing that is for you to say that to me. But it's, man, I hope that hits just as hard for anybody listening on what that means for you. And there are multiple times in my life where I look back and regret that I didn't do something that I wish I would have at least tried. Right, even if I wasn't successful at it, I would have at least tried. Sure. It's one of those that it's a solid advice. And a great way to kind of wrap this up. So, Kevin, it was an absolute pleasure getting to know you a little bit more, getting to learn about your family, your story. I absolutely love it. Hopefully one day we can actually meet in person, or maybe even do a round 2 of this, or do a round 2 of this in person, perhaps. But I thank you so very much for coming on, Kevin. If people wanted to reach out to you, find your products, anything like that, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Yeah, so at Harbor, our mission is happier parents and healthier families. That is why we do what we do. And we have a ton of free resources available for parents. Doesn't matter if you're a customer. Harbor.co, we've got a great blog, tons of experts, and lots of ways to reach out to our nurses and get some help, even if you don't buy our product. Mizzen+Main.com, that's easy. And then I'm on X at Kevin S. Lavelle, and on LinkedIn, I've been posting parts of my journey, trying to build in public in some way. Folks can reach out to me either way there. I'm a little bit in life overload right now, so I don't know if I can help, every inquiry that comes my way, but if I can be helpful to anybody, love to do so. X or LinkedIn is probably the best way to do so.
Well, everybody listening, please reach out to Kevin, follow him, chat with him, buy his products. I will definitely be, especially the shirts, I will be looking up those in the very near future. But thank you so very much for jumping on, Kevin. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Please like, subscribe, all of that stuff I'm supposed to tell you to do, and we will see everybody on the next show.
Thank you so much for listening to the BizDad podcast. We hope you found some value in your time here with us, and we look forward to bringing you the next episode. If you've enjoyed today's show, please subscribe and share so you and your friends won't miss our upcoming episodes. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Rumble, where we continue these discussions and share more valuable content. Be the dad you know you need to be and run your business in a way you're proud to share with your kids. Keep crushing it.